Welcome to ZKast, everybody. I'm Z.S. Caravallo from ZK Research, and I'm here for another episode with my co-host, Chris Preimesberger. Chris, I understand you've had a bit of a change. In addition to being the editor emeritus of eWeek, you're now a contributor at ZDNet. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, thanks. Yeah, I'm not used to this. I've been at eWeek for 16 years, and to get up and work for another, publication is kind of fun and refreshing. ZDNet, the pace at ZDNet is 10 times faster than at eWeek. The international scope is fabulous. The staff is out of this world and the best there is. So I'm joining a great team. It's like a baseball player joining, the major leagues. It's really something. So
well, welcome to the show, I guess. So
yeah,
that's funny. Well, congratulations, anyways, Chris. And but going back to eWeek, and before we get started, I do want to thank my media partner eWeek, where ZKast is done in conjunction with its eSpeak program. First up, Chris, is Cisco. They actually held a little mini online event this week called Future Cloud, where the event talked about the vision of the cloud and they announced some new products to support that. Now, the thesis of the event is that the cloud is changing, and it is, right? We live in this hyper-connected, distributed world where we're dependent on the cloud more than ever. We do, frankly, everything in the cloud, from our personal lives to our business lives. We need to be faster, more agile, more distributed, and a lot of the legacy compute architectures out there don't really work anymore. Now, so most of their announcements revolved around hybrid clouds, and it's funny because when you talk to people about cloud, what comes to your mind at first is always AWS and Azure and Google. But in fact, private cloud's a pretty big chunk of clouds. In fact, my research shows that in 2017, private clouds only made up about 17% of all workloads. Today, that's 25%. So there's been a pretty big rise in hybrid workloads. So in an effort to make infrastructure more agile, Cisco actually has a new version of their UCX server. They call it the X series. And it's hard to believe, you probably covered this at eWeek, but it was 12 years ago that Cisco announced what was known as Project California, which was their first entry into the server market. And so Cisco's been in servers for over a decade. The new X series server is a behemoth of a box. It has over 600 cores, 1.5 petabytes of storage. We'll have a graphic on it come up here. 35 million IOPS, 100 terabytes of memory, and it's built on a new fabric technology. It's called an X fabric, which actually makes the product fully composable. So if you look at the product, it's got almost this crossbar backplane, which you can take in components and move them out and stuff. So however that changes, you can change it with it. So it's designed to be kind of a composable server for the composable era. They also they have a product called Intersight, which now has a low-code, easy-to-use kind of automation framework to speed up the ability to deploy UCS components or hybrid clouds in complex workloads. Now, I think Intersight's an interesting product for Cisco because if you think of the traditional virtualized data center, VMware's vCenter, in fact, the reason people bought VMware, I believe, wasn't really quality of hypervisor because Nutanix and Microsoft both as hypervisors. It was the fact that vCenter was the control point for the data center. And I think what Cisco's trying to do is make Intersight the control point for this world of clouds we live in. And now you can manage public clouds and private clouds through Intersight. They also launched something called a Service Mesh Manager. And if you understand what a service mesh is, it's a way to be able to deliver a bunch of services in a highly containerized world. And so, the whole concept of this cloud-driven world we're in is to make things more agile, more dynamic. We're moving into edge computing, and the complexity level of IT is going through the roof. And I think you need the right type of infrastructure and the management tools.
Yeah, you need all that diversified service list of services, but you also need a centralized control and a good user interface, and that's what vSphere did. That's what it brought. Was a very usable, flexible kind of an interface for the developers and those using it. Cisco should be the same, I would believe.
I'll be curious to see too what happens with containers in VMware, because right now a lot of container deployments, people are run what's called a VMware integrated container, where they're running containers in VMware. And I've always thought frankly, I've always hated that model because it's running one abstraction layer
Right.
in another abstraction layer. But people did it so they could use vCenter still, right? Because they have a
Exactly.
comfort with that.
Exactly. And yeah, when container the container trend got going in 2014, 2015, VMware was nervous as heck because it was competing directly with their ESX and their whole scheme. So they went and immediately made a kind of what I called an eWeek, a cradle for those, so that people using microservices and containers could use them on vSphere. And you're right, it's an extra layer of abstraction that doesn't, it helps developers, but I don't know, it's not direct. It's still another layer. And that, that's something you don't really want if you don't need it. So.
And I find the whole concept of what UCS server is, and there's other competitive products like it, Dell has them, and even some of the HCI platforms, fascinating because we, as an industry, we've been so quick to decompose the server, right? So you think of an old server, it was a box that had everything in it, and then we wanted to pull out storage, we wanted to pull out, we're pulling up memory now, right? You can have GPUs reside in pools. So we've decomposed the entire server. But now we have to build composable infrastructure to help us recompose what we already decomposed. And it's kind of fascinating the way the pendulum swings away. Now, granted, with the composable infrastructure, you get much better utilization. Like if you think back 10 years ago, the average utilization of a server was like 30%, which you just couldn't live with today. It was pretty expensive. Yeah, and so today's composable infrastructure, I guess, is supposed to, like the new UCSX, allows us to have the simplicity of the server, but with the utilization of decomposed. So
that's a lot of decomposing, composing going back and forth there. But that's the way IT is.
Yeah, more of that to come, and we're going to stay on this train of the compute vendors. I know, Chris, this week Dell actually announced some new partnerships and technologies in the 5G space, and you've been covering that pretty close. So give us a bit of an update of what that is.
Yeah, real quickly, Dell announced last week that they are really going whole hog into the 5G area. We haven't heard much from Dell EMC in 5G, really, because they don't make phones and they don't make a lot of 5G kind of devices. However, what Dell is doing is they're reaching out to the telecoms with some specific types of services and products. And one of them is called Project Metal Weaver, which is a software package that gives the communication service providers the ability to select and autonomously deploy and manage thousands of compute, network, and storage devices across multiple locations. So that sounds like networking to me. They're getting more into that. They're also coming up with some new reference architecture. So they've got some templates and some examples of how this new tech should be used in different verticals. So we'll see those. And then they're also going to start a new ecosystem lab for specific kinds of use cases that they can work with clients and potential customers at. So those are something that's something that Dell and EMC are really working on as they continue to expand their business. They need to upgrade their enterprise software for the new speeds of connectivity.
Yeah, I find Dell's a fascinating company because they've got reach into almost everywhere. In fact, I would guess that most of the telecoms are Dell customers already, probably just buying servers. VMware, which is a Dell company, or was a Dell company, was very active in 5G. In fact, Pat Gelsinger was very outspoken that he thought 5G would eventually usurp a lot of the Wi-Fi, which I don't really believe. But Dell itself as a company really hasn't had a position on 5G. But the one thing I will say about 5G is if you look at the 5G specs, Chris, it mandates cloud native infrastructure, right? So all 5G deployments will be built on microservices. And so the monolithic type of hardware that we had in the past that built up 4G, 3G goes away. And so that creates an opportunity for a company like Dell, who has been very active in the area of cloud native, to be able to come in and add some value. And so when you think of the traditional RAN vendors, you know, a Nokia and Ericsson, something like that, I wouldn't really think of them as being cloud thought leaders. Not that I think of Dell as being a huge cloud thought leader, but they're certainly closer to it, you know, than the traditional network vendors. So I think this is a good opportunity for Dell to insert itself in the 5G ecosystem and actually raise its profile there, because it's been trying to crack that code for a long time. It just hasn't really managed to.
Right. Yeah. And since they're going to be separating from VMware this year, they don't have VMware really to use anymore for any of the IP. So they got to develop it themselves. And it looks like they have been doing a lot of homework and R&D on this over the last couple of years.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that update. And last on the docket, let's talk a little Facebook, right? We had recently the Facebook F8 event, and they actually called it F8 Refresh, which they're going back to the developer. Now, if you understand the history of F8, it was called F8 because it was an 8-hour developer event. It was a hackathon, and the 8 and F8 actually comes from the fact that it was an 8-hour event. And over time, F8 changed, became more of a kind of business leader, show, IT pro, things like that, and moved away from the developer. So this year they wanted to go back to the developer. They announced a number of key things. One of them is that the Messenger API for Instagram is available to the developers. And I think this is important because it's been my thesis for a while that we don't really want more apps, right? We want the apps that we use, right? We want the apps that we use to have the functionality built into it. So if I'm in a retail app and I want to be able to talk to the retailer through Messenger, right? I don't want to have to then go to Instagram or to Facebook, fire up Messenger and talk to them. I'd rather do that in app. And so that lets me do that. I also think, you know, they've got hooks now into Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, things like that. They've got a business extension too. So Facebook Business, they're trying to make that a little more developer friendly. And this is important for Facebook because they've had Facebook at work for a while. I wouldn't say it's been a smashing success. They can always announce a handful of customers, but for the most part, I think we would have expected more from a company like Facebook in business already. And the goal of Facebook shouldn't be to be Zoom or Teams or WebEx or something. It should be to be, the goal should be Facebook, right? And that's a developer-led organization. And I think that's, you know, for them to enter the enterprise, it is going to be through developer. Lastly, they actually had some announcements there of augmented reality. I like augmented reality for business purposes. I can see it being used in a lot of customer service. I was talking with one of the appliance manufacturers, and they were saying, look, the way they'd like to use it is, imagine, you know, you've got a refrigerator at home and the filter needs changing. Well, if you call into customer service, they might have a hard time helping you describe where that filter is. But if you could hold your phone up to the fridge, they could use like an augmented reality widget to point to where the filter is, have a little arrow showing you unscrew it this way, then you pull it out, that sort of thing, right? So it could actually help you with a lot of step-by-step directions. You think of even like something like trying to get your cable modem working at home. Why can't I put my phone over the cable modem, and through augmented reality, it says plug this cable in here, plug the power cord in here, that sort of thing, right? So there are some use cases. So, but you know, any thoughts from you on F8?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Facebook Business hasn't had the traction that they'd like to see. And so what they're doing is, and they're smart to do it, is they're using their own already very successful channels like Instagram and WhatsApp for more business purposes. And they're going to the developer community with tools and APIs to do this. And, you know, it's going to do is result in more business for Facebook's customers. You know, you think of Instagram as just being a social network for teeny boppers. No, you know, so it's not. It's going to be used for other things, and Facebook is smart to do it, to do that. The one thing I wanted to mention about Zuckerberg's keynote address was that, like, one of the first words that came out of his mouth was privacy, and he has pledged, you know, and then a lot of eyes were rolling, of course, you know, probably watching this. And even
talking about honesty.
Yeah, right. Even he was rolling his eyes a little bit because he knows that and he even said that Facebook doesn't have the greatest rep for privacy. We understand that. But I get the impression that Zuckerberg's really going to push seriously for reeling in privacy on the network. How he's going to do that is a huge question, and it's going to be up to the developer community, which they're reaching out to right now. So we'll see.
Yeah, and you're right about Instagram. I know one of the data points that they had on their website was that 90% of people on Instagram today follow at least one business, and messaging was a big reason why. In fact, I get messaged by brands all the time through it. So it's an obvious adjacent market, right? If I'm following, like one of the ones I follow is like Cipollini Bites, right? Because I have one of those.
Right.
And so I've messaged the company through that. It's a faster, easier way to get a hold of them. So to me, the Messenger API integration for Instagram is something I'm surprised that they really haven't had yet. And maybe they were worried a little about the privacy, but I do find it interesting thing with that Zuckerberg was talking about, given how cavalier Facebook has been historically about privacy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so anyways, Chris, that brings us to the end of this week's ZKast. I know next week, Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference is coming up, so we'll see what they have to say, as well as some other things. So again, thanks, Chris. Congratulations on the new role. I'm as your friend, I'm excited for you. And again, everybody, thanks for watching. Don't forget to click to subscribe, and we'll see you next week.